Kadosh Boker or Daf Yomi Masechet Sanhedrin Daf Samech Amud Aleph 62a1. We were talking about over here that we asked that if right now they came and they did a certain avodah zarah, but they didn't accept it upon themselves like a god, so lo klumu, so it's nothing, right? Elalav me'avav yira. So therefore, obviously, they did it out of love and fear. Zotomeret. When he came and he bowed down to this idol, he wasn't doing it biglal hu kibel Eloha al atzmo. It's not because he accepted it like a god unto himself. He was doing it biglal o ahava o yirah. Mazot ahava o yirah, because of love or because of fear. But Rava is going to tell you no. Beomer mutar. What happens if a person thought that it was mutar to serve avodah zarah? Yeah, why? He thought there was no isur avodah zarah min Torah. So says the Gemara, haomer mutar. That's helam davar. We always learned, and that's what we were just doing now in the Mishnah Yomi. Helem davar means that you don't know about something. So sometimes it happens that you don't know about the tumah. So for example, you became tameh. V'ata lo yodea she'ata tameh. Right? Lo samta lev. Right? You didn't realize. Or ata yodea she'ata tameh. Right? You know that you're tameh, but you didn't realize that this was part of the Bet HaMikdash and you're not allowed to go. Or you didn't realize that the food was kodesh. And then so that's called helem davar. Right? Right? When something is ne'alam me'ayin. Right? Or right? Basar shenitalem minayin. Something which is hidden. Hidden means I don't know about it. So if you come and you think that it's permitted to do avodah zarah, which is concept of omer mutar, that you say that it's mutar, so therefore that's helem davar. So he says, right, omer mutar, hainu helem davar. So answers the Gemara, omer mutar legamre helem davar, right? Kiyum miktzat uvitur miktzat. What does that mean? Here the Braita is talking about omer mutar legamre, which means that he thought that there was no isur bichlal whatsoever to do avodah zarah. So therefore, since he's oker legamre the isur, it's not helem davar. Helem davar is only when there's a little bit of the isur, but you're annulling a little bit of part of the isur. So, for example, if you know that you're not allowed to do avodah zarah, let's say, for example, with bringing korbanot or ketoret, things like that, but you thought you're allowed to bow down to it. Meaning, what he's trying to say is helem davar zeh sherak chelek me'adavar ne'elam. That's called helem davar. But when he comes and he says, we're talking about the concept here, it's talking about that you thought the entire thing was completely mutar. That's on helem davar. That's completely that there's no problem, right, whatsoever. Okay? Fine. Tanu Rabbanan. Yeah, we learned in a Raita. Tani Rabbi, Rabbi Zakai came to Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Zakai came and he taught in front of Rabbi Yochanan. Zibeach ve'kiter v'nisech v'ishtachava be'helem echad. If a person comes and he's mizabeach, what does that mean mizabeach? He comes and he's going to slaughter. The keter is the ketoret. He does the incense. Nisech is usually the wine libations, even though we learned that it could have been the blood. V'ishtachava, and also we're talking about bowing down to it. Be'helem echad, with one shot, which means that he did not he was only one thing he didn't know about the Maaseh that he was doing was a sin. So he did all these things. He did korban. He did everything. And it was all in one shot. He didn't realize it's an avirah. He only does one avirah. What does that mean? He only brings one korban, one sacrifice. Why? Because in order to come and in order to do teshuvah, it's one korban. So Elmaleh, so Rabbi Yochanan comes and he tells Rabbi Zakai, Buktani lebra. Teach this outside. Don't teach this here. Right? Why? Don't even bother. Meaning this is a mistake. Don't come into the Bet HaMidrash and start teaching something which is completely a mistake. Okay? So Amar Rabbi Abba says Rabbi Abba. Had Amar Rabbi Zakai, this is what Rabbi Zakai just said. It's a machloke between Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Natan. Between Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Natan. The Tanya was learned in the Braita. Havara lelav yatseah. Havara was taken out as a lav. Divrei Rabbi Yosef. Says Rabbi Yosef, these are the words of Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Natan Omer, Rabbi Natan says, Lechalek Yatsa. You remember what we're talking about? We're talking about Ilchot Shabbat. Remember that Ilchot Shabbat, there's 39 milachot. But the Torah specifically takes out, Lo tevaru esh bechol moshvotechem yom HaShabbat. You're not allowed to do Havara. Why is it that the Torah specifically took out Havara? Why did it take out of all the 39 milachot that you have, right? That you're not allowed to cook, and you're not allowed to plow, and you're not allowed to plant, and you're not allowed to... Why Davka? Esh. So this is a very famous machloka between Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Natan. Rabbi Yosef comes and he says lelav yatsa, which means that it's coming to teach you that it's only going to be a lav and not karet and skila, which means if somebody's going to be mechalel Shabbat, what is the punishment? So we know if they do it purposely with witnesses and hatra'ah and warning and everything, sekila, they get killed. Betid. What happens if they did it without, let's say, a warning or without witnesses or without? So what is it? Karet. And obviously, if they did it b'shogeg, they bring a korban chatat, right? They bring a sin offering. However, though, that is the shita of Rabbi Yosef, that the lav is only on havara, meaning if somebody put on a fire on Shabbat, there's no sakila, there's no karet. It's only a lav. A lav is a negative commandment. A lo ta'aseh is a lav, right? A negative commandment. That's all that there is. There's nothing else. That's why they took it out, meaning it specifically took it out of all the other melachot in order to make it a lav. Rabbi Natan comes and he says, lechalek yatzia. What does that kavanah lechalek? Lechalek means is that it mentioned it separately in order to differentiate between all the different melachot, right? Which means that when we're coming and we're talking about, right, that each one of them, right, when we're coming and we're talking about each melacha is going to be a separate isur. And therefore, if you did them b'shogeg be'elem echad, you're going to be chayav on every single one individually. So what happens if a person cooked and they plowed on Shabbat? Right? It's 1-on-1. Why? How do you know that? Havara. Because havara lechalek yatsa. What does that mean? It came out lechalek. So since it came out lechalek, so therefore on every single av melacha, you're going to be chayav. Okay? Leman da'amar, according to the man da'amar, havara lelav yatsa, that it came out as a lav. So ishtachava nami lav yatsa. So ishtachava was the exact same thing. Meaning, just like by Ilchot Shabbat, everything was included in the 39 melachot. And when we say that it's going to be included in the 39 melachot, it took out havara. And why did it take out havara? To be, right, to take it out as a lav. So to ishtachava is the exact same thing. Ishtachava was also part of doing service to Avodah Zarah, which means when you come and you do service to Avodah Zarah, when you do Avodah Zarah, have ishtachava, bowing down to the Avodah Zarah, like any other of the avodot to the Avodah Zarah. So why did you take it out? As a lav. But according to the Manda Amar, that really be'emet, not like Rabbi Yosef, like according to Rabbi Natan, that really be'emet, it's lechalek. So just like by Shabbat, you took out the lav of havara, right, in order to be mechalek between one av melacha and another melacha, meaning if you did 3 avot melachot on Shabbat, you have to bring a korban on every single one benifrad. Kol echad benifrad, because it's 3 different averot. And that's what's coming, lechalek yatsa. So according to that, ishtachava is b'diuk oto davar. Meaning if a person comes and he did, right, zevicha, and the ketoret, and all these things to the avodah zarah, so it's lechalek. So each one is a separate averah. So says the Gemara, matkif la Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef comes and he asks, dilmad kan lo kama Rabbi Yosef hatam. Maybe be'emet we're not talking about that over there, right? Shehavara lelav yatsa, that the avara is talking about for the lav, the nafka le michiluk melachot, right? Because he's learning it that there's going to be a chiluk melachot from the pasuk, because it says ve'asa achat mehena. If you do from one of these, right, you're going to be chayav achatat. The Tanya was learned to the right. Rabbi Yosef says ve'asa me'acha mehena. What does it mean that you're doing one of these melachot? Pamim shechayav achat al kulan, pamim shechayav al kol echad ve'achat. Sometimes you could do an avera, and he says you're going to be chayav one chatat, right, on all of them. And sometimes you're going to do an avera and you're going to be chayav a chatat on every single one. So says Rabbi Yonatan, my time, what's reasoning Rabbi Yosef? So he says very simple. Tichtiv, it says in the pasuk, ve'asa achat mehena. What does it mean, ve'asa me'achat mehena? Why did it say in that word? So he says, achat me'achat, henna mehenna. Meaning, right, you could have come and just write down ve'asa achat henna. Why did it say ve'asa me'achat? And it said mehenna. Why is it extra mems, or an extra mem on me'achat and an extra mem on mehenna? So what's going on exactly? So he comes and he says, right, so the extra words, you're making a darash, right? So what is going to be the darash? Achat shehi henna, right? Vehenna shi achat. Sometimes you could do one avera that is considered henna, a few averot, and you're going to be chayav a few different chataot, and sometimes you do a few averot, and it's only going to be considered one avera, meaning it's making that they're both the same halachot. Ve'asa achat, you could have said ve'asa achat henna. It didn't say it. It said ve'asa me'achat mehenna. So one of them is achat like henna, and one of them is henna like achat. So therefore, he's coming and say that sometimes you have it. So what is the case? So he comes and he says like this: achat. If it would have been written achat, yeah, without the mem, meaning not me'achat, achat. So therefore, you say that he did an avera shlema, and he's not going to be chayav until he does the entire melacha. So, for example, let's say he wanted to write the word Shimon, right? So, only if he writes the entire word of Shimon, he's going to be chayav. Me'achat, the second that you say it's me'achat, even if he wrote Shem Meshimon, you're still going to be chayav. We know that when you write on Shabbat, it's only two letters. But now what happens if his kavanah, though, was to write Shimon? So now Shimon has 4 letters, 5 letters, right? It doesn't have 2 letters. So therefore, I would have thought that maybe since his Averah is to write Shimon, even though he wrote 2 letters, he's only chayav when he writes the entire word of Shimon. Kamashmalan, that he's already going to be chayav Shem Mishimon. The second that you write Shimon, you write Shim Mem. And then you have to write the Ayin Vav Nun Sofit. So therefore, the second that you wrote the Shim Mem, the Shem Mishimon, you're already going to be chayav, even though your kavanah was to write the full word. Okay? So he says, so that's why if it would have been written, right, achat instead of me'achat. So he says, henna, right? What does that mean? Avot. Mehenna toladot. Achat shehi henna, right? Zedon Shabbat v'shigom melachot. Right? What does that mean? You knew it was Shabbat, but you didn't realize about the toladot, which means even though the person came and he was mechalel Shabbat and so on and so forth, he's going to be chayav chatat nifredet on every single melacha because there's a shigiga nifredet on every single melacha. So he's going to be chayav. Now, when we said the word henna shiachat, shigigat Shabbat v'zdom melachot, which means that you knew that the melachot were surot, but you forgot it was Shabbat. Meaning you remember that we said there were 2 things. A person walks into this room and he turns on the light. So it could happen 2 things. Either he forgot it was Shabbat, and therefore he turned on the light, or, right, he didn't know that turning on the light when Shabbat was a sur. Meaning he knows it's Shabbat. You're going to say, Shabbat? Yes. He's, I didn't know. That's called a melacha. Melacha, turning on the, putting a switch, pressing a button is called a melacha. I didn't know that. Melacha, don't go to work. Yeah, either. So there's 2 ways of looking at it. There's the Zedon Shabbat, Shigot Melachot, the Shigigat Shabbat, the Zedon Melachot. Meaning, at the beginning, you had the Zedon Shabbat, which means you knew it was Shabbat, but you just didn't know it was a melacha. The second one is that you forgot it was Shabbat, but you knew it was going to be a melacha. So therefore, Rabbi Yosef is learning the chiluk melachot Shabbat from me'achat mehena, and therefore he's saying havara is a lav yatsa, and therefore since he already learned, right, the havara is lav yatsa, and he already learned it from me'achat mehena. Meaning like this, according to Rabbi Yosef, where does he know there's a difference between chiluk melachot? Because that's the concept of Rabbi Natan, lechalek yatsa. So where does he learn that? From V'asa me'achat mehena. That's how he learns it from. That there's going to be such a concept of different melachot, and you're going to be chayav achatat on different melachot. So he comes down and he says, so because of that, obviously he learns that havara was just a lav. It wasn't lechalek, because I already learned it from V'asa me'achat mehena. So what did he learn it from? It's a lav. It's a negative commandment. It's not chayav sekila. It's not chayav karet. So if a person comes and he turns on a fire on Shabbat, right? What are you going to tell him? You just did a machloket Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Natan. According to, right, Rabbi Yosef, you only did a negative commandment. I cannot kill you for it. No sekila, no karet. I can't. It's a love. According to Rabbi Natan, yes. Aval hacha, but here to do with avodah zarah, I don't have another place to come out to learn it from. So therefore, the chule alma. So according to everybody, meaning like this. Svara pshuta, common sense, is that if I'm going to come and take out one melacha out of all the others, it's lechalek between one melacha and another melacha. That's the common sense. Rabbi Yosef says it's not lechalek, it's leotzi lelav as a negative commandment. Now the question is, why does he learn it that way? And the answer is because by Ilchot Shabbat, since he already learns lechalek, that there's a difference between one melacha and another melacha from another pasuk, I cannot use the isur of havara also lechalek, because I already learned it. I already know it, right? So if I already know it, so what is havara teaching him? So havara lelav yatsa, it's coming to come out. However, though, in a case where we're talking about, right? In a case where we're talking about ishtachava, right? What is that? Avodah zarah. Avodah zarah. Nobody told you that there's a difference between one melacha and another melacha. So for there, if I have a choice, meaning I have an extra ishtachava that's taken out, nobody's going to tell you that it's for a lav. Even Rabbi Yosef would tell you it's lechalek, because the only reason why Rabbi Yosef told you that it's havara is lav yatsa is only because he already learned lechalek from another pasuk. But if you do not learn it from another pasuk, you're not going to say that, but that's not common sense. So therefore, it comes out that you have it. So says the Gemara, Chiluk melachot da'avodat kochavim nami tipuk lemechamena. Says the Gemara, 1 second. You know what? You wanted to say that this is lechul alma, whether according to Rabbi Yosef or Rabbi Natan. Why don't I say the exact same halacha? Meaning, how do you know that there's different melachot on Shabbat that you're going to be chayav? Da'asam me'achat me'ena. Right? There we're talking about averot in general. We're not talking about Hilchot Shabbat. Right? And then you have to bring a korban. So therefore, why don't I learn also avodah zarah from there as well? Meaning, just like by Hilchot Shabbat, according to Rabbi Yosef, you learn from Ve'asa me'achat me'ena, you learn from there lechalek between one melacha and another melacha. So to do Hilchot avodah zarah, oto davar, the exact same thing. Learn from Ve'asa me'achat me'ena that there's a difference between avot melachot. There's a difference between ishtachava'ah and all the right zoveach, yetoret, all the other things. Also learn it. So says the Gemara, if it would have been written achat, right? So for example, right, if it would have been written achat instead of me'achat, right? So therefore I would have thought to say zevicha for avodah zarah with 2 simanim. Me'achat teaches you 1 siman. Meaning like this, how do you do a korban? You do shechita. What is shechita? So for shechita, usually what we have to do is 2 simanim. There's a kaneh veveshet, right? There's the esophagus and the trachea, right? Kaneh veveshet, right? Right? So when we come and we talk about the kaneh veveshet, right? Which is the 2, the food pipe and the windpipe, right? So therefore, I would have thought to say that you have to do 2 of them, meaning, or the majority of the 2 of them, in order to be chayav on the zevicha. He comes and he says, when it says me'achat, I'm only learning 1 of them. 1 of them is already enough. Meaning, if a person came and he cut 1 of the 2 simanim, it's already enough for avodah zarah. So he says avot, right? He comes and he says, right, zibuach, and then now when he says henna, that's going to be avot. When it says, right, what are the avot? Zibuach, kitun, nisuch, ishtachava, bringing a korban, the ketoret, right, the nisuach, which is, right, this is the wine libation, ishtachava. Me'ena is going to be the toladot. Shiber makel lefanea. What happens if he broke, right, a stick in front of the avodah zarah? And he's doing it, right, because by doing that, he's using the stick as like the shchita. Now, it's not derech to do that. It's not normal to do that. So, achat she'i henna, right, what does that mean now? 1, which is going to be henna. So he comes and he says, Zedon avodah kochavim shigat avodot. Henna shi'achat, shigat avodah kochavim zedon avodot. Meaning, just like by Shabbat, I explained to you that there's going to be 2 concepts. One of them that a person made a mistake that it was Shabbat. So he came in, turned the line. Why? He forgot it was Shabbat, but he knew it was a melacha. Or, right, there was a shogeg on Shabbat, meaning he was shachach Shabbat. Aval hu yada sheze melacha. So right, you're going to ask him, is turning on the light a melacha? Yes. But I forgot it was Shabbat. Okay. What about the other way around? I didn't know it was a melacha on Shabbat to turn on the light. I know it's Shabbat. You ask me, Shabbat ayom, but Shabbat. Why did you do a melacha? What melacha? I pushed the button. It's a melacha. So therefore, the same thing is avodah zarah. One of them is zedon avodah kochavim. You knew it was an avodah zarah, but you didn't know this was an avodah for the avodah zarah. Meaning you didn't know this was a sur. So you come and you spitted it, and you didn't realize that's what you serve it. You didn't know. So it's a shigigat avodat, right? This is, you made a mistake on avodah, right? And the other one is shigat avodah. You didn't even know it was a sur to serve avodah kochavim, but you know it was an avodah. So says the Gemara, what's the case of shigat avodah kochavim? If he thought beta knesset too, it was a beta knesset, and then he bows down, we already said. Imagine a person comes to the beta knesset, he's right bowing down, he thinks but rather he saw an andarta, he saw this pesel, and he comes and he bowed down. So Kakadosh, we're in the middle of Samich Bet Amud Aleph. We were talking about right now where the person found a pesel. You remember a pesel is basically just like, say, for example, like a statue. That's many times, it's not even avodah zarah. You have the statue of a guy, right? That it's like a monument. So Vesagile, he bows down to it. So says the Gemara, if you're going to tell me that he accepted it upon himself like a god, so mezidu. And if he did not accept it upon himself, so he didn't do anything. So therefore it was obviously because he did it out of love or out of fear. What does that mean? Sometimes it happens that you do it out of love and fear, but not the be'emet. You actually have the kavanah, right, of doing that. That's the question. So the Gemara says, right, as follows. Right? He says like this. This is good according to Abaye, the Amar the Chayav that he says you're going to be Chayav. Rava the Amar Patur, or according to Rava that he says you're going to be Patur. Michael, what are you going to say? Ela beomer mutar. We're talking about that you said it was mutar, meaning that you remember we just mentioned at the beginning of the shiur. What happens if you thought it was mutar to do this? You thought it was mutar. Somebody asked you, say, well, I didn't know. Well, what's the problem? So Tifshut Dabaya Minei Rava and Rav Nachman. So why don't we just bring a proof from the fact that we asked Rava from Rav Nachman? Helem ze veze biyado. Mao. What happens if a person has the helem of both of them? You remember we spoke about that a person either forgot it was Shabbat but knew it was a melacha, or he knew it was a melacha. One more time. He knew it was Shabbat, but he forgot it was a melacha, or he forgot Shabbat and he knew it was a. No, I said the same thing twice again.
Either he forgot that it was Shabbat.
He forgot it was Shabbat, but he knew it was a melacha, or he knew it was Shabbat, but he didn't know it was a melacha. Exactly. Right? That means basically it was one or the other. What about both? He forgot it's Shabbat and he forgot it's a melacha. Meaning he didn't know it was a melacha. That's helem ze veze. What's halacha? So says the Gemara, Tifsho deno chayav ela achat. You should only be chayav, going to be one. You should only be chayav one thing. Right? So says the Gemara, halokash, it's on a question, v'tifshot. Why don't they actually say that you can bring this as a proof? Meaning that bemet, right, to do with avodah zarah, we're going to learn a mekor to be mechalek in the avodah zarah, right? Also from the same thing, meaning that we went. If you remember, we said that by Shabbat we already knew from right from me'achat mehena, right? Me'achat mehena, we already know lechalek. Therefore, according to Rabbi Yosef, if you already know lechalek, which means to differentiate between different melachot, so therefore it's extra when it comes and tells you havara. So havara lelav itman, it was lelav yatsa. It came out as a lav. What's a lav? A negative commandment, and it's not going to be karet or sekila. But why didn't we do the same thing about the zara? Says no, because you didn't learn it from anywhere else. Ask the Gemara, why didn't you learn from here? Right? Also, ve'asa me'achat mehena, right? Oto davar. Salam mishos. That what? That it's going to be the same halacha. That if you're going to come and it's going to be mechalek between one melacha and another melacha. So therefore, why was ishtachava taken out? So also lelav. So says the Gemara, Umi matzi mukbel la'nikra b'avodah kochavim. Can you actually say ve'asa me'achat mehena to avodah zazara? Dilu hacha, here, k'tiv, it's written b'mashiach par uvenasi seir uviyachi kispa v'seira v'ilu b'avodah kochavim tanya v'shavim, right? Shebeseira ki yachid. What does that mean? We know that many different types of sacrifices depends on who's doing the avera. So, for example, if you have a Kohen HaMashiach, Kohen HaMashiach means a Kohen that is anointed with the Shemen HaMishcha. The reason why we call him Kohen HaMashiach is because of something which is called Merubeh B'Gadim. Merubeh B'Gadim means that there were certain Kohanim, right, especially during the Second Temple, but even in other times as well, that, for example, they were not anointed with Shemen HaMishcha. The only difference between them and everybody else was that they had more clothing, meaning a Kohen Gadol has 8 clothing and a Kohen Ediot has 4 clothing. So therefore he was called Kohen Merubeh B'Gadim. But there was a Kohen HaMashiach, means that he was anointed with the Shemen HaMishcha. So Kohen HaMashiach, he's going to bring a par, a bull for the chatat, and a nasi to do the king. He's going to bring a seir, a he-goat, and a yachid, an individual, is going to bring a sheep or a she-goat, a seira, not a he-goat, a she-goat, seira, instead of a seir. So therefore, he says that is all to do with what we're talking about over here. But to do with avodah zarah, we learned in a braita, the shavin, that the Rebbe and Chachamim, they argue to do with all the other avodah zarah, all the other korbanot, they agree that it's always going to be a seira, just like a yachid. Meaning, you cannot learn right? You cannot learn from ve'asa me'acha me'ena to avodah zarah. You know why? Because look at the korbanot. The korbanot which are brought down afterwards are not the same. So therefore, the fact that it's not talking about avodah zarah. So if it's not talking about avodah zarah, we go back to the beginning. There's nowhere where we learn lechalek, right, to differentiate between melachot by avodah zarah. And therefore, when ishtachava was taken out, it was taken out what? Lechalek. That's the common sense at the beginning. First, it's lechalek, right? So says the Gemara, ve'tulomide. So therefore, we don't have anything else, which means that obviously we don't have an answer, and therefore, obviously, we cannot learn the chiluk of avodah zarah from that pasuk ve'asa chamena, and it's talking about this. Ki atar Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda. So Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda comes to Bavel. He said, Amar, he said, 62b. Hachi tana kameh. This is what Rabbi Zakai taught in front of Rabbi Yochanan. Chomer b'Shabbat nishar mitzvot. We have a chumrah by Shabbat more than other mitzvot, and there's a chomer from other mitzvot more than Shabbat. Chomer b'Shabbat Shabbat asa shtayim behelem echat chayav kol echad ve'echat. If right now you did 2 different chilul Shabbats, you're going to be chayav on every single one individually. Mashenken b'Shar mitzvot, but not by other mitzvot. Right? What is that? Okay, the Gemara is going to explain. right? And he says, Chomer b'shar mitzvot, sheb'shar mitzvot, shagag b'lo mitkaven, if you did it by mistake, without kavanah, you're going to be chayav. Mashenkem b'shabbat, you're not. So Amar more says like this. Chomer b'shabbat, sheshabbat asa shtayim, echidam, what's the case? Ilay madavad, if you're going to say that he did ketzirah utchina, right? He did two different melachot. He did reaping and grinding. It could be any two. It could be planting and plowing. It could be any two, right? So therefore, he comes and he says, that by other mitzvot, for example, if a person ate chelev and dam, he ate the prohibited fats and he ate blood. He drank blood. So therefore, he says, it's 2 and 2. Meaning, if a person comes on Shabbat and he reaped and he grinded, how many averot did he have? 2. How many korbanot? 2. So it's 2. What do you want to say? Shar mitzvot. What is other mitzvot? Let's say he ate chelev and dam. So he ate chelev, the prohibited fats. Remember, the shuman is the prohibited fats, chelev is the prohibited fats. He ate chelev and he drank blood. Okay? So now you're going to tell me, what did he do? 2. How many is he chayav? 2. So why did you tell me that by Shabbat it's 2, right? That you're going to be chayav al kol ha'chavachat, but not by shar mitzvot. Shar mitzvot also the same thing. Ela legabe shar mitzvot de'eno chayav al achat. So what is the case? And hechidami, ta'achal chelev v'chelev. You ate chelev and chelev. Tekavate b'Shabbat, but by Shabbat you did ketzirah and ketzirah. So he says the Gemara, 1 second, in that case, it's also the same thing. If a person came on Shabbat and they plowed, and then again they plowed, how many is he going to be chayav? 1. But it's the same av melacha. It's the same thing by shar melachot, right? What does it mean, shar mitzvot? What does that mean, shar mitzvot? If a person comes and he ate chelev, and then again he ate chelev, or he drank blood, and then again he drank blood, how many is he going to be chayav? 1. So therefore it's the same thing again. So says the Elmaleh. So that's why he told him, Puktani bara. Get this out of here. Why? Because this doesn't exist. Yeah, take it out of the bit of Nash because it's a mistake. It doesn't. So says the Gemara, my kushia, what's the question? Dilma leolam emilacha. Really, I'm going to tell you. De'avad ketzirah utchina. You did do ketzirah utchina. Mashenkem mitzvot tatan levodah kochavim. That's coming like chachamim. Levodah kochavim levodah zara like Rabbi. De'amar Rabbi says Rabbi ziveach v'kiter v'nisech v'lemechad v'chevechat. Meaning, maybe the shar mitzvot is talking about specifically avodah zarah. That by avodah zarah, if you come and you did now, you brought a korban to avodah zarah, and you brought a ketorah to the avodah zarah, and you did hishtach, whatever it was, you did a whole bunch of avot melachot to the avodah zarah. You only chayav 1. But on Shabbat, if you did ketzirah and tchina, you're going to be chayav twice, 2. So maybe that's all the cases. So says the Gemara, lo mituk maleh. You can't say that we're talking about only avodah zarah. Meaning, we wanted to say that shar mitzvot is only avodah zarah. You can't say that. He says, why? Tektari seifa, because we said in the seifa, chomer b'shar mitzvot, shagag v'lo mitkaven chayav, shagag v'lo mitkaven avodah kochavim hechida. What's the case by shogeg, by avodah zarah? If he held it's a better knesset and he bowed down to it, harelibo l'shamayim. So for he's got his heart to the shamayim. Ela de chazan darta, he saw a monument, and again he bowed down to it. So says the Gemara again, if he accepted upon himself like a god, so then that's mizid. And if he didn't accept it upon himself as God, lo klum, it's nothing then. Ela barador ma'avavira. It's going to be that he did it out of love and fear. Out of love and fear means that he didn't think about a God. He wanted to gain love, or he was afraid of the person that's beside him. So he bowed down to the Zarah. He didn't accept it as a God. But we are mefached, right? Or he wanted to show his love for the person. So hanicha baye damar. That's good according to the Bible that he says you're going to be chayav, but according to the Rabbi that he says you're going to be patur. What are you going to say then? Be'omer mutar, that you thought it was going to be mutar. Mashenkem b'Shabbat patur legamre. There you're going to be patur legamre. Ad kan lo ba minem Rav ben Nachman helem ze v'ze rak, right? Ile chiyuv echada, ile chiyuv tarta. Patur legamre lekamandaman. Meaning, when we came and we started this Gemara, we thought that there's going to be a chumram, one on the other, that it's either going to be, one is going to be chayav 2, and the other one is going to be chayav 1. But not that one is going to be patur legamre, because how men mutar on Shabbat, you're patur legamre. So therefore, we weren't speaking about such a case, because that means if you thought that it was, it's completely patur. We thought, okay, if you do this on Shabbat, you're going to be chayav 2. If you do it shar mitzvot, 1. Or the other way around, right? That it's also good. So here it's patur legamre. So it's not the case, because nobody ever thought about such a case. So says the Gemara, my kushia, what's the question? Maybe I'm going to tell you that the Reisha is talking about avodah kochavim, and the Seifa is talking about shar mitzvot. What does that mean? The Reisha is talking about avodah kochavim when he comes and he says, right, that you're comparing Shabbat to avodah zarah. So on Shabbat, if you come and you did ketzirah and tchina, reaping and grinding, how many are going to be chayav? 2. If you did avodah zarah, zoveach, right? Ketoret, right? And Menasech. What are you going to be chayav? One, like Rabbi Yan. So therefore, that's the Reisha. The Seifa, when we're talking about, that's talking about other mitzvot. So Shagag velo mitkaven. The Kisava Roku uboleo. What happens? You thought that it was rok, so you come and you swallowed it, and really be'emet you swallowed it, and really be'emet you didn't have kavanah for the achila, right? And really be'emet it was chelev, but it was chelev which was like when it's heated up, the chelev, the fats when it's heated up, it looks like it's very liquidy. Exactly. So he thought it was phlegm or whatever. So mashenkim b'Shabbat, you're going to be patur. Shenitkaven la'agbiya et hatalush v'chatach. Imagine right now you come and you wanted to pick up something from the ground, and you didn't realize it was connected to the ground. So you plucked it out of the ground. You did kutzer, tolesh, right? You completely detached it from the ground. Right? You're going to be patur. Like Rav Nachman and Shmuel. Damar, hamitasek b'chalavim uvarayot chayav, sheken ne'eneh. Hamitasek b'shabbat patur, melechem achshevet hasatorah. If somebody is going to be mitasek, to do with any type of chelev or arayot, he's chayav. A person cannot come and start having relations, and he was mitasek. He wasn't paying attention, right? And then no, he's patur. No, he's not patur. He's benefiting. He's enjoying himself. So if he's enjoying himself, he's going to be chayav. But to do with b'Shabbat, you're going to be patur. Mitasek b'Shabbat is patur. Why? He says melechem achshevet hasatorah. The Torah only prohibited when you have the melacha, when you set thought in your mind. So, for example, let's say right now I'm walking by the door, right? And right, my dear friend here, Amid, blocked me. So I didn't want to hit him. So I went by and I went on the right side. And then what happened? I turned on the light with my elbow. What is that called? Mitaseh. It's not even shogeg. Shogeg is that I know what I was doing, but I either forgot it was Shabbat or I forgot it was a melacha. Here, I'm not even shogeg. It's a lighter level. It's mitasek. Ani mitasek b'masho acher velo samti lev vepitom zeka. What's the nafkamina? To have to bring a korban. If right now we have a Bet HaMikdash, Bezrat Hashem, built still in our days, so what happens? We have to come and we have to bring a korban chatat for every time that we're mechalel Shabbat. If right now I came into the room and I forgot it was Shabbat, chas v'shalom, and I went and I turned on the light, I have to bring a korban chatat. But if I was walking by and all of a sudden my elbow tripped the switch, I don't have to bring a korban.
Yes, mitasek no.
Exactly. Mitasek is different. Mitasek by Shabbat is completely different. So says the Gemara, okay? Huh? No. Well, Mezid is not going to be. Mezid is karet. Karet or sekila. If there's warning and there's witnesses, it's sekila. If there's no warning or no witnesses, either or, so then it's going to be karet. So says the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan comes and he answers according to his reasoning. You cannot differentiate the Reisha, because what did we just want to do until now? We wanted to say that the Reisha was comparing Shabbat to Avodah Zarah, and then the Seifa was comparing Shabbat to other mitzvot, because we couldn't say it was Avodah Zarah because we said it just doesn't work. So he says, says Rabbi Yochanan, I don't want to say that the Reisha is Avodah Zarah, Seifa Shar mitzvot. Rabbi Yochanan says, the mande metagem li chavit aliba dechatana muvilna mane batre lebe masuta. Somebody that's going to explain the Mishnah of Chavit, according to one Tana, I'm going to come and I'm going to take his clothing right behind him into the Bet HaMerchatz, meaning like Hilu, that I'm going to serve him. Obviously, there we're talking about the Mishnah B'Metzia. We're talking about if a person is going to be mafkida Chavit etzel chavero, he didn't, right, which means he comes and he gives a barrel to his friend, and he didn't designate a place in the house of the shomen. And then what happened was, he went and he took it, right, letzorech atzmo, right? And then what happened was, that kilu he stole it, and then if he put it down and it broke, he's going to be patur. Now he says if he was miachelo makom, which means he does designate a place, and then he moved it, right, and then afterwards it broke, he's going to be chayav l'shalem. So when the Gemara comes and it starts asking, it starts saying different things. We're saying different tanaim. Rabbi Yochanan doesn't like that, because I have to say that this is one tana, this is another tana. It's true, it does sound a little bit, fishy, as they say. Say like one is this thing, one is the other thing. So therefore, that's why he just said that I'm going to take the clothing behind.